We are live on YouTube now. Mayor Spence, you're on mute. There we go. There we go.
Welcome to the City of Warman's regular meeting of council. It is Monday, April 27th, and I call this meeting to order. Is there any announcements from anyone? Well, we are coming to the end of April, but I would like to thank all the volunteers we have for the City of Warman for their contributions today and in the past. Thank you. And from all of us from the City of Warman, we want to say that we appreciate all the efforts of all our volunteers in our community and in our area. With that, let's move to approving the agenda. Motion, please. Councillor Philipchuck, Councillor Peterson. Are we all in favor? Okay, thank you. Approval of minutes. Motion. Councillor Tooley. Is on mute. Okay.
I'll make the motion to adopt the April 13th, 2020 regular meeting of council and the April 20th, 2020 committee of the whole meeting as presented.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jones, is there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay, thank you. We'll move down to administration report, starting with City Manager Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. In early March, Route 11 Arts Cooperative had asked Council to consider the waiving of the $1,000 a month lease fee for the space in the old library building. The item was presented to Council on March 6th and again on March 23rd, where consideration was referred to a future meeting. It has been brought back again for Council's consideration with 5 options presented. One would be to waive the lease fees. Second one would be to consider waiving the fees, except the cost of utilities and maintenance. There's also an option for no change in the fees and it remain the same. Option 4, Route 11 continue to pay the fees and the funds are put into a reserve for Council to distribute for city sponsored events. And then there was also any other proposals Council may consider. So leave it for Council's consideration.
Okay, well, we have 5 options there right now. Is anyone willing and able to recommend one of those options? Councillor Beck?
Thank you, Mayor Spence. Yeah, this year I'm going to propose option 5. Obviously, with this year, if council's not in favor of that, we can certainly amend the amount. But I guess what my recommendation would be, or the motion that I'd like to put forward, is that council maintain the rental revenue from Route 11, with the equivalent funds directed to a discretionary reserve to support city-sponsored events in partnership with Route 11 Arts Council.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Does someone want to second that? Councillor Peterson, is So I'll open up the floor to any comments. Councillor Shram.
I just would like an answer to a question to the mover of the motion. This means that on top of the amount of money that Route 11 will pay, the city matches that for a discretionary reserve, or does that money from the rent go into that discretionary reserve?
The money of that rent would go into that discretionary reserve. So with this year, we're not actually adding to it. With this year, we're basically just setting that money aside, basically saying, that the rental, collected would then be available for use through the partnership with Route 11. And basically that same equivalent amount of funds can certainly be supported back to support the arts here in Warman.
Yeah, I was questioning the word equivalent because it makes it sound like there is an extra, we're making an equivalent or an equal amount to.
So, yeah, certainly with this year, my intent is not for us to match the amount that's paid. It's basically just whatever Route 11 would actually pay for that rental space to basically be put aside in that discretionary reserve that can be drawn from for partnerships towards the arts.
Councillor Philipchuck.
I'm not against the amount being set aside. I'm not sure what it'll look like for them to be able to access. Would it be the recreation board that would come up with this, or would it be another layer of bureaucracy to be able to get this? Like, what would be the way that ultimately we're asking the arts to be able to apply for this? So it's just Route 11's, but we're saying for all arts, and right now we have a recreation board established that it's under their umbrella. Would that be the format of being able to access this money? And I guess I'm a little bit more coming from the idea of, for the arts, it's important to have for the city, obviously, but a little bit more with some of it eyes on, hands off, with some of it where it doesn't create a lot of layers and a lot of meetings to be able to get some money, which ultimately ends up costing more than we're actually giving.
Councillor Jones. You're on mute, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I wouldn't, my preference is that we would provide them a lease rate that covers the operating costs of that facility. We give them some room to try and grow the arts. I think we have a board there that's interested in doing that on behalf of the arts in the community. And I really don't think at this point, other than providing them a subsidized lease, that we need to have any involvement. And I don't, when I look across our organization, I don't see a lot of value that we're going to add other than trying to provide a little bit of space for them to grow. So I wouldn't support that motion. I would support a subsidized lease, again, recognizing that, the arts and trying to give them room to grow is very important for the community. There hasn't been that type of help, but I don't think we need a lot of involvement other than that from the city at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tooley.
I tend to think something along the lines of what Councillor Jones has mentioned as well. And I think of a situation where if we had that building, say, as a standalone building where it was just, Route 11 was a single tenant, I think of a situation where we would maybe provide them the space, say a nominal amount, $1 a year or something like that, and then have them take care of their own expenses, their own maintenance. And so I tend to more go with like an option like number 3, as opposed to the number 5. And not that not that in theory I don't disagree with number 5 in some respects, but I think ultimately that particular option, if we were to put all of those funds into a discretionary equivalent fund, we'd be taking the entire rent amount, and we'd actually also then be covering the operating costs. So it would cost actually more in the long run than what it currently would right now.
Councillor Beck?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, like in regards to the points that are made, this year, the Route 11, but this year certainly has access to, quite a bit of funding and opportunity to access funds through the city of Warman. I'll just put through, just an example that's going to be approved through our, through the accounts that's attached to today's meeting. And with this year, check number 22831, with this year, there's a performance fee, actually two of them for $31.50 each. Where this is a city partnered, let's say a partnership with Route 11, where there's two community performance that have been booked. So, certainly with this year, the, there's a lot of funding related, opportunities already that, that do exist, that I think aren't really recognized already. And I guess with this year, I guess that's where I was going, with the rental amount that we have established, that's already at a discount from what would be, considered fair on the open market. So we know that this is a subsidized amount already. We'd basically be just saying, that amount that is collected is basically set aside. And to answer Councillor Philipchuck's, point earlier in terms of how would that be accessed by Route 11, to me, it would be no different than, than the paperwork that they would fill out requesting, monies be set aside for them with the lotteries grant. So I see that system working well. And, this year, I just think it's something that the council could approve relatively easy, and you certainly go from that particular front. To me, that's not an onerous position for the city to take, and certainly maintains fairness from what I can see across the board with our lease agreements.
Okay, so we've had comments. Let's put the motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's defeated. Does someone want to make another motion with one of the other options? Councillor Philipchuck?
I'd like to make the motion that that council maintain the rental revenue from, sorry, I'm on the wrong one here. That council provide a counter lease agreement for consideration at a rental rate of $440 per month to help set off the cost of utilities for the portion of the building occupied by the Arts Cooperative.
We've got a seconder for that. Councillor Jones. Is there further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else under city manager, we'll move down to finance manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item I have for your consideration tonight is the outstanding utility bills. Please find attached 3 utility accounts with outstanding utility amounts dating back to the summer or fall of 2019. Please be advised that multiple notifications and attempts to collect on these accounts have been made. Administration is requesting council approve the recommendation to apply these outstanding utility balances to the related property tax accounts.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Is anyone prepared to make that motion? Okay, I'm not, okay, Councillor Jones.
Make the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep. I'd like to make the motion to apply the listed outstanding utility balances to the related property tax rolls in accordance with section 333(1) of the Cities Act.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Beck. And we'll open the floor for any questions. Anyone have any questions? Councillor Peterson? We can't hear you.
Sorry. I'm going to make the same comment I make every time this comes up, and that is, I don't believe that we should be applying, these invoices to the owner, and when it's not their accounts that are overdue, it's tenants overdue. I think we need to find a better way to track the tenants so that we can go after the people who have run up the bills, not the landlords. We keep doing this, we're going to run out of landlords in Warman, and that would be a shame to not have rental property here.
Okay, is there any other comments? Councillor Beck?
Yeah, counterpoint to the position put forward there by Councillor Peterson. Certainly with this here, the homeowners or let's say like the property there certainly does receive service for water from the city, and somebody has to be accountable for that. So with this here, between the tenant and the landlord to figure out who that is. Obviously with this here, we're sending the bills as to however they have agreed that the bills be received, and the dispute and whatever between tenant and landlord. Ultimately with this here, the landlord has to be responsible for that. So with this here, I while you respectfully maintain your position, I respectfully retain mine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried, thank you. Okay, moving down to planning and development.
Thank you, Mayor Spence, members of council. Just one item for discussion tonight. It's a discretionary use for Unit 3, 1211 Boucher Avenue. An application has been received to open a retail store. Will be jewelry sales at Unit 3, 1211 Boucher Avenue. The use is considered a discretionary use in the M1 district. Under the City of Warman zoning bylaw, this use, based on the floor area of space that they'll be using for the retail, requires 1.5 stalls. We did advertise this use in the local paper for 1 week. Notice was sent to property owners living within 100 meters. This is the last unit to be occupied in this development. We did hear no concerns or comments from anyone through our public engagement process. So the recommendation tonight is that council approve a retail store for Unit 3-1211 Boucher Avenue.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Who would like to make that motion? Councillor Peterson, seconder, Councillor Beck. Any comments? Councillor Tooley.
I just have a little bit of a concern when it comes down to sort of it's almost been a patchwork process that we've had in regards to this particular development as the uses have come forward, and parking has seemed to have been an issue with just about every space that we've looked at approving in there, beyond the first 2 or 3 or whatever that number was. And where I'm concerned is when we're moving forward with developments like this, I really think the parking, regardless of what the potential uses are going to be when a property is going to be condominiumized, I think we have to have parking kind of locked up and a good plan for parking moving forward, because I really find that, we have a bit of a band-aid solution on this one for parking when it comes to the property across the street. However, what's on site for parking doesn't seem to meet the requirements or the intention of our zoning bylaw. And I think we need to look at that on a little bit more of a holistic approach in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Tooley. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's probably definitely, especially to council, seemed a bit patchwork in terms of, especially the way kind of the applications have slowly kind of trickled into, a number of different council meetings. It is, difficult from our perspective when we're first looking at a development, just because under certain zoning, there is such a kind of range of uses. We did kind of contemplate originally when this development was developed at looking at potentially rezoning it. That obviously wouldn't have changed any of the parking requirements or real process, besides kind of maybe speeding up some of the approval, but definitely comments well received. We do what we can to kind of look at minimum parking requirements when we're looking at a development like this, kind of off the offset. But again, if you get one kind of use in there that triggers requirements for a number of stalls, like for example, in this case, the brewery portion, it kind of throws off all of your estimates or kind of options that you were looking at originally. So that's where we kind of looked at the adjacent site and on-street parking, and we do feel okay with this one, although comments are well received. It probably did seem a little patchwork just by the way the applications came in.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Shram?
With that being said, Brett, is there any due course for the planning department in the future for this situation and to remedy the situation, maybe when things are sold, or that, I guess, is this going to be an ongoing problem?
So moving forward, we'll kind of continue to do what we do when we look at these types of developments, which is kind of look at that middle of the road. If X, Y, and Z located hypothetically in this building, what would kind of the parking requirements be? And we kind of take typically a middle road with that, hoping that there'll be kind of a couple on the higher end and a couple on the lower end, and it'll kind of balance each other out. Moving forward, definitely we're always kind of open to some changes within our policy, but we have looked at other parking policies and other zoning bylaws in other communities, and parking requirements kind of across the board in cities our size and commercial areas outside of downtowns and larger cities are pretty standard. So we're comfortable with the numbers we have there. We'll maybe just in future developments try to look at maybe a little on the higher end when we're estimating parking requirements, so that hopefully when we get to the end, we're not in a situation similar to this one.
Councillor Philipchuck?
Just, I thought Councillor Shram was going to head down here, and maybe he was a little bit with that question, is as places get sold, do they come back to us as far as approval? Because I guess in the end, what we're approving for looks like it's going to work for the current day, but knowing that if there is something there that attracts a lot of vehicles, that the parking situation won't work as that area develops.
So yeah, as each of the units is sold, typically the approval process after that involves either this as a first step, if it's a discretionary use, coming to council for approval, and then it has to go through a building permit for the interior renovations. And in that building permit stage, that's where we're looking at all the accessible and handicap stalls. In terms of if it's an approved use, it doesn't come to council for approval first. It gets approved across our desk if it meets kind of all of the requirements, including kind of meeting that parking standard. So even though we approve the shell of the building as a whole initially, there is kind of a separate auxiliary approval process for each unit where we could have commented, like if we had major concerns with the parking in this situation, we would probably recommend refusal. But I am fairly confident that with the adjacent site parking, the extra on-street parking, and kind of the nature of the uses that we've approved in that development, we won't have an issue. But if I felt like there was going to be an issue, for example, we had another big restaurant or something come in there, we would potentially recommend refusal to council. And I guess at that point, it would be a discussion.
Okay. Well, we have a motion on the floor. Are we all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you, carried. I think that's it for planning and development. We'll move down to economic development.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council. Before I go into my report, I do have to make one minor change, and that is to the first recommendation. It should read, administration recommends that the 7 leases remain waived until access to the city facility is restored or reopened, and option 4 be considered for the rest of the leasable areas. With that noted, in front of you is my report. At the previous meeting, a committee of the whole meeting, a request was given to council on behalf of the Prairie Sky Chamber of Commerce, requesting waiving of their lease fees for the following 4 months, April, May, June, and July. At that meeting, council had requested more information regarding the current leases for the city, as well as the current state of those leases. Within this report, you will find that information, including a recommendation for how to move forward with any further lease requests and a recommendation for the Prairie Sky Chamber of Commerce's request.
Okay, well, let's start with the first recommendation. Is anyone prepared to make that recommendation? No. Okay, so do we want to maybe ask Josh questions about his report first? Councillor Philipchuck?
Okay, so I guess just a point of clarification, do we really need two motions here if we are looking to waive the interior facilities? Like we need something like that, and then if we want to look at the other facilities as a different motion, because I don't really see it as one motion that can handle that. But I guess I'm looking for some clarification from Bob or Josh on that.
Josh?
Sorry, I'd likely defer to Bob in terms of the motion. I believe the request to have those 7 leases remained waived was sort of to provide direction, but I'm going to defer to him, if that's okay.
City Manager Smith?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I guess the intent was we have already advised the ones which we closed that they would not have to pay rent because we closed them during the time that we closed them. And so we're just looking for approval of that by council. I guess if they didn't feel that they wanted to approve that, that's certainly something we can go back to those people that are within our facility and advise them of that. And then the rest of the leases, it could either be at an individual basis, so anybody that has access to the outside could be on an individual basis, or if council wish to make a decision as a group on them as well. It is a bit more complex than just because we do have basically 3 facilities. We have nonprofits. We have nonprofits that are part of the, provide a service to the community, such as the Route 11, etc., minor hockey, those types of things. And then there's others that we provide, they just provide a service to the community outside of. Then we also have some facilities that have access from the outside. And then we also have facilities that have businesses with which we closed access to. So.
Okay, so if I'm hearing this right, the first recommendation is something that we're already doing. Is that right?
It is for the 7 leases, correct.
Okay, so we've been doing that for the last 6 weeks. You're just wanting an official motion for that.
Yes, so you could split it into 2. You could have the 7 leases remain waived, and then have another motion for the other.
Okay, I would think that would be probably the better way to move as well, because we've already done it. So, Councillor Phil, Councillor Beck first, then Councillor Philipchuck.
Thank you, Mayor Spence. So I suppose the comment that I would like to make to this is, this year I still feel that there's a number of fluid, parts to, to the waiving of lease rates. I mean, obviously with this year, yes, we did close down the building and whatnot. With this year, in the Prime Minister's address today, he actually mentioned that about supports 2 municipalities, which hasn't been cleared or let's say outlined yet. So with this year, I guess I have a question probably to Bob in this case, is with this year, if we waive the lease fees and that kind of thing, and if there was support from the federal government or even provincial government for that matter, where those leases would be covered either, by the respective jurisdiction, would we lose the entitlement for this if we actually waive those costs? So I don't know. I mean, with this year, I mean, I think it's one of those things where we've kind of deferred it. We haven't made it official or whatnot. We've certainly had some discussion about it, and we know that we want to do something, and we definitely want to be fair about everything. I'm just wondering if this has financial consequence to us.
That's a good comment. I too think that there's a lot kind of rolling out from the federal government that we're not real sure about as well. So, Councillor Philipchuck?
I guess something similar along the way. It was that there's so much up in the air right now. It's hard to really make these motions with knowing that it is a bit of fluid motion or fluid situation, knowing that do they have access? Because we're really not looking at hardship here, that we're looking how we can help support, and especially the ones that are interior locked. Would there be access to money for them to be able to pay their obligation to the city? And we're just waiving it. So I think there's that part of it, but it's also the other two facilities that we're really talking about, because it really is Route 11 and the chamber, the other two that we're talking about in this situation. Do they have access to be able to get money for their lease responsibilities along the way? And is this something that we really need to deal with right now or not? I guess I'm looking for a little bit of clarification, because as programs roll out, is it necessary to deal with this right now?
You want me to provide a bit of a comment? Okay.
Can we we'll hear from Councillor Jones first, then we'll go to you, City Manager Smith.
Just building on what both Councillor Beck and Councillor Philipchuck have talked about, I see a Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program that came out that, you know, when you give it a quick read, it sounds like a lot of the tenants would be eligible for. And with that, there is a part to play from the landlord. You know, we end up paying 25% of, basically deferring 75%, but of that 75%, the provincial and federal government pay the landlord 50% of it. So I just also think that we need to learn a little bit more about how these programs are going to apply before we make a decision. They're just being rolled out now.
Okay, City Manager Smith and then Councillor Shram.
Yeah, just to answer the question, everybody's absolutely right. This actually came last week. The request came last week. We didn't even know there was going to be any type of program rolled out by the federal government. So it was brought last week. The economic development officer was asked to bring back all this information. That was a request of council, so that's why it's been brought here. But you're right, on Friday there was an announcement, and then there was a bit more detail, and not a lot, whether it would be municipalities, whether it be just businesses, whether it be under a threshold, all those things. So I agree with all of what council has said, but the reason it's here is because we were talking about this a week ago.
Yeah, I think we wanted to have the information in front of us, but I think there's just so much more happening that maybe we don't want to be premature with this decision. Councillor Shram?
Yeah, Bob, my concern is in the last part of the recommendation, and that is that when the city facility is restored or reopened, that could be that is a very fluid situation itself. So what constitutes is it a full open? Like all of those things are not clear, and they're very fluid, and it leaves it again open to interpretation. I guess what is it that you see when we talk about it being restored or reopened? How does that affect their rent? They may not be able to get all of the people. The schools are not they're closed. I guess there's so much there that's on that maybe can't even be answered, I guess.
Okay. I'm hearing that we all feel that there's a lot of information yet to come out before we can really look at this seriously. Would it be fair to say it should be tabled until our next meeting? So by then we should have more information and have a better idea of where we want to go. Okay, it looks like I got thumbs up. Is that, Richard, did you have a final comment there? Or is that?
No, this year I was giving support to having this deferred to another time. Yeah, and not necessarily next meeting, you know, certainly once it becomes clear as to what that program is, you know, then this year, you know, then I think, you know, administration can certainly dot the I's, cross the T's and bring forward something, you know, that can be solid that we can stand behind.
Okay, Councillor Tooley?
Just a little bit of a question. The route that we're going down right now, with the leases that are kind of impacted because of the closure of the facilities, I just want to sort of put the question on the table and at least for us to think about. I hope we don't have some intention of going back to them at some point and saying, oh yeah, by the way, your lease is still on, while we see how the other programs roll out, that kind of thing. Or like, I just want some clarification around what our thoughts are there.
Are you wanting those from City Manager Smith? Is that what you're thinking, Councillor Tooley, or?
I think so, just because it seems like the path we're going down is that we want to sort of defer decision making on this until we sort of know more details of those plans. However, we do have some instances where we haven't been collecting rent, and I guess if we, you know, move down the road or move this down the roadways and we decide that, you know, ultimately we ought to be collecting rent from those spaces, will we be then making the request for them to pay that rent that would have been due during the time frame?
I'm thinking not. We've already made this decision 6 weeks ago, and I don't think we would want to go back and tell them now, by the way, now you owe us. I don't think, am I right, Council, that we would all feel the same?
I wouldn't go back, no. I wouldn't support that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't either. I was just, I guess, wanting just a clarification though, just because we're sort of talking about moving everything. However, we do have the ones where we currently have waived them. And maybe we want to make it clear that that's our intention there because the facility was closed to the public, that as a result of us making that decision, that they've effectively kind of been grandfathered into that no collection.
Councillor Philipchuck?
I'd be fine putting a motion forward that the 7 leases remain waived until all access to the city facilities is restored.
Okay. Okay, well, first let's go to a seconder for that, and then we'll go to comments. Is there a seconder for that one? Councillor Peterson, and I think Councillor Beck, you have a comment on there?
Yeah, you know, this year I'd be very concerned over wording on that. With this year, you know, I mean, I think right now what we're talking about is the difference between being deferred and being waived, right? Or I mean, right now, you know, with this year, until like an official motion is made by council to actually waive the fees, with this year, we're basically, from what I recall from, you know, reports through City Manager Smith and also our recreation manager, is that with this year, like, there's been no collection of rents, you know, and that kind of thing in those closed facilities. We basically have the expectation, and we've kind of, you know, of you know, let's say waiving those in the future. But with this year, we've basically deferred collection. We haven't made the official motion yet to defer it. And I think once you go down to wording of deferred, then you've basically waived all of your rights, you know, for that amount and whatnot. So with that, I don't support the motion. I'd be willing to amend it where waive be replaced with deferred. But with this here, that there to me seems, let's say, relatively ineffective. I think we're making a motion for the sake of making a motion, and I don't think that puts us in a very good position either way on this.
I think too, we're not in a rush to do this, and that decision has been made. Why not wait until the information comes out to make sure that we aren't leaving something on the table? Councillor Philipchuck?
I guess that goes back to what Councillor Tooley was saying, though, is there's confusion potentially for those because we're sort of saying both ways, that the places that do not have access to their facility, we're saying, no, we're under the understanding that they won't be paying rent, but yet now we're saying, no, we don't want to make a motion that makes that, so that's on the book somewhere. So I think that's what I guess I was trying to do, is that we said yes weeks back that when the building's closed, that was made administratively made decision there. And I guess I'm trying to put something on the books that sort of makes sure that, as Councillor Tooley had mentioned, that we don't go back to him in the future and say, well, we were going to defer it, not waive it. And so I think what communication has been given to them, maybe that's something I'm looking for from City Manager Smith on these. And so some of it is just put on books what I think we were already saying.
So City Manager Smith, do you want to comment there?
Yes, that's exactly what we've advised, is because we closed the facility, the question was asked of those individuals that were operating out of there, if they would have to continue to pay rent. And we advised, because we had closed the facility, that we wouldn't expect them to pay rent. However, that doesn't mean that that decision's been made, although I think it is difficult to go back, as you had mentioned, Your Worship. But and they would be waived. Deferred means put to a later date. Waived means we're closed and we're waiving, just for clarification.
Okay, Councillor Beck and then Councillor Shram.
Yeah, there again, just to build on my point is, this year, until we see that federal or provincial program and that kind of thing, if you do go with waived, I mean, and there again, I think when we perhaps communicated to the leasees and we said, hey, you know what, we're gonna waive, the fees for you and whatever, we basically said, you know what, there's gonna be no financial consequence to you. I mean, it doesn't mean that our expenses have really been deferred, or our right to revenue has really been, deferred or waived, and that kind of thing, until obviously that motion is ratified through council. But with this here, I think it puts us in a precarious position if we turn around and waive those, and with this year financial supports do come through, for us to turn around and say, oh, wait a minute, yeah, we deferred that and whatnot, or pardon me, waived it and whatever. But with this here, we have a claim against the province or against the federal government, for their support programs. So I don't know. I mean, to me, that's more of a mixed message than anything. So, with this here, I definitely don't support the wording. I mean, I support the intent in terms of there's no financial consequence to our leasees, but we've communicated that already through the recreation manager, and I think he was pretty direct with us in terms of that's what he did explain. So there again, I mean, while it'd be nice to pass a motion to turn around and say, hey, leasees with this year, it's officially off the books, I still think that puts us in a spot where we're now trying to go back for any other programs, or we're basically accepting the loss. And I don't know that our citizens or taxpayers or business community would accept that, without thoughtful process.
Okay, Councillor Shram.
Well, I think, I understand the intent, and I don't have any problem with what we're talking about. I guess I'm thinking on down the road, because this is very fluid, that because the province is doing this in phases, and when you get to the rec centers being open, well, we don't know what that looks like. And to me, we've already gone down this road of waiving or deferring, whatever one you want to talk about. But now when you then get a chance to open the rec center, there may be restrictions to that. And therefore the businesses then, I guess, they accept that consequence. How do we negotiate that? Especially when we make the motion that says we wait till they're open. Well, open could look totally something different than what we think it does today when it finally happens. I guess I'm very concerned about blanket statements that don't take into account what the province may in fact impose upon us. That's just my thoughts.
Okay, we've had a lot of discussion around this. I think we're going to call the question here. I think there's been enough discussion. So, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay.
I think it's important, though, we say what the intent was, because if I was a business and saw that we defeated this motion and the language from the city manager, so I think, so at least it's on the table that the intent is that we are not expecting that there's a financial consequence for our businesses that do not have access to their facility.
I think that in this discussion that became very apparent. We've preluded the discussion with that statement, so I think it's safe for our city manager to say that. Okay, we need a motion to file the administration reports. Who wants to put their name on that? Councillor Shram?
But point of order, we still have the second motion for the the Chamber of Commerce.
I was under the impression we were just deferring both of those, all of that.
Okay, those are two separate recommendations. So I'm sorry.
Okay. Council, are we all in favor of deferring the second one as well, along with the first?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to file our administration reports. Councillor Peterson.
I'd like to make the motion to accept and file the administration reports for April 27th, 2020 as presented to council.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Shram, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Moving down to council reports. Mine is just for your information. I did want to publicly thank our administration executive team, which would make up, oops, there we go. That would make up our city clerk, Dawn Johnson, that our communications and executive council assistant, Aaron Legg, and also Jennifer Doucette from the Legend Center. I want to thank them for all the work that they do for us. Last week was their special day, and since none of us were in the office, we weren't really able to celebrate their work. So I just wanted to say thank you. Is there any questions of my report? Okay, so I guess we'll move. You know, I didn't see Janelle on the call. Is Janelle's not here? Okay, because we have the youth representative report in front of us as well.
No, Janelle is not here today.
Okay, so if we could have a motion to accept both reports. Councillor Beck, seconder Councillor Shram. Any questions, comments? The motion, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I would like to make the motion to accept and file the Mayor's and Youth Council Representatives Report for April 27th, 2020 as presented.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Council roundtable, we'll start with Councillor Tooley.
Just a quick update.
Something's wrong with your mic, Kevin. Something's wrong with your mic.
Is it better?
No.
Okay. I'm not sure what's going to make that better. So give me a second. I'm just going to turn it off.
We'll come back to you.
Okay.
Because it wasn't doing that when you were speaking before, so something's different. Council Peterson, we'll go to you.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Councillor Shram?
I've already talked to Bob about this, but we did have a bathroom that hasn't been picked up, or a porta potty, and so Bob has looked after that now. The second thing is the food bank. I can give you some numbers, and so if you want to write these down, donations received from residents is $5,000. and $500.24 and sorry, $5,524.12. Donations from Warman clubs and businesses is $1,700. Donations from Warman churches. Now this is donations received to March 23rd. Donation from Warman churches, which is only two, is $5,297.01, which makes a total of $12,000, $12,521.13. The bank balance as of April 22nd, 2020 is $22,662.35. Number of families that have received cards once between January and April 13th has been 24. Number of families that received cards twice has been 4. Number of families that came for food once in addition to cards, because we also do a kind of a pantry, has been 8. Number of families for food twice in addition to cards has been 2. Number of families that came for food 3 times in addition to cards has been 3. The number of gift cards given prior to COVID-19, and I guess we're talking about the middle of March there, has been $3,040. Number of gift cards given during COVID at this point has been $1,100. 93 people in total equals 23 households. 8 of those 23 are single parent families. 52 people are kids, 41 are adults. And that is the essence of my report. If you would like a hard copy, I can send it to you.
Yes, if you could send that to us. Does anyone have any questions of Councillor Jones?
Just curious, Kendall, so how does that compare to average the last month or so, the last 2 months?
Well, I think that there's, from what I understand is, I guess I'd have to talk to Gina in the nitty gritty. I think that there has been a bit of an uptake in the last month in comparison to last year. I think that there is an awful generosity that's flowing through the community right now from residents, from clubs, from churches. And I think that we're presently in a very decent place right now. And I think we're able to handle, the future for the next few months. And as the generosity flows from individuals and residents and the things that are taking place to meeting the needs, and all of this is very fluid, I think we're in a good place.
Councillor Shram, I have a question as well. What do you do to advertise how people can reach this food bank? Because I had that question come to me.
Well, they are able to call our church. There is the food bank Facebook page, and it's basically by word of mouth as people understand that they can come forward and avail themselves either of gift cards or of food. So it's really by word of mouth, the Facebook and call and phone.
I guess, and so, because would the average person know to contact your church though? Because I'm thinking as a community, we may need to do some advertising of that number or where they can go, because I think there's a bit of a disconnect there. So do you think that you could work with Aaron to put a communication together that maybe could go into the newspaper, or just because it can't all be through Facebook or online, because a lot of people don't have that access. So just so we can get that word out.
Yeah, I mean, using paper is a cost, and I guess, you want to be careful about that cost. But I don't have any problem with, allowing the city to put out a communique for us. It's a thing to juggle here because we're not really a nonprofit in the community. So we can't do gifts in kind, and so it's I can work on that. I don't have a problem with that. If there's a problem in communication, we can work on that.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? Anything else, Councillor Shram?
No, that's everything.
Okay, Councillor Jones.
Nothing to report.
Okay, did you want to give another stab at it, Councillor Tooley?
Well, let's give it a try. Is that better?
Perfect.
There we go. I did that. Turn off the headphones. Just wanted to give an update to the group. Just on Friday, the task force business call, and they actually had MLA Hefner was part of that phone call just to take some questions and give a little bit of a sort of a high level discussion about the just the phased approach to starting to remove some of the restrictions and moving forward. So that was well done. I know Economic Development Officer Wells would have been part of that call as well. And one of the questions that I did bring forward to her just privately, sort of in the chat room, was just around places of worship and where they're going to fit into the plans. Just sort of to ask that question. She was going to look into it a little bit further and raise the question. And just at the end of it, I did send her messages thanking her on behalf of Mayor Spence, Council, and myself.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Beck.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Spence. So I have a few items to report on. For this year, I certainly see that our yard waste bin is certainly out and being well utilized by residents. I see them out tidying up the yards and collecting leaves and doing some tree trimming and that kind of thing. So certainly this year, that is one aspect of the city that is being well utilized at this time of year. So I think that is certainly great to see. I'd also like to give a shout out to our public works for the street sweeping efforts. With this year, like there's a number of streets that have been cleaned and yeah, you know, certainly cleaned up quite well. So this year, I certainly recognize public works efforts for all of the work that they're doing on that front. I did get a response from a resident that I had forwarded off to City Manager Bob Smith. This was regarding a fire pit regulation complaint and whatnot. So I had forwarded that off to City Manager Bob Smith and also to Planning Manager Brad Toth. And with this year, they certainly responded very quickly to you know, to what was being assessed there and whatnot. And I'm like, you know, that they reached out, they got Wade involved and also our fire chief, Russ Austin, involved in that kind of thing and whatnot. And it was certainly investigated very thoroughly. So I would like to recognize all of the efforts from those individuals for responding so quickly and professionally to, you know, to what was out there. I haven't heard anything further from the, you know, from the assertion that there was a, you know, that there was an actual fire regulation contravention. So this year that there certainly appears resolved. So there again, you know, certainly in a very time out there administratively where we're changing up a lot of our protocols and things like that. We had fantastic response. So just a superb job on that front. And I guess in closing, similar to the mayor's report, certainly recognizing all of the administration, you know, positions for all of their duties and service to the city of Warman for, you know, for the April 22nd administrative recognition date. So thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Philipchuck.
One that I'll mention is the Planning for Growth. I know that Councillor Shram and Mayor Spence were there, but it was interesting. Just it was our first chance at using a different platform, go to meetings. It was also a chance to hear words like synergy and hear words like working together. This is how it should be working from Mayor Clark and Reeve Harwood, and start seeing things that what are we doing to make this the best region out there. And so I'm looking forward to actually Manager Toast's report is coming at the next committee of the whole, talk a little bit about that. And we're even looking at trying to get Neil to one of our meetings, whether it's even in this format or not. So there'll be more information coming, but it's good language that's happening. We're starting to see things that are happening that are making our region stand out. The other thing that just mentioned again, seeing good energy around. Some people I've had, that are a little down. Sometimes we just have to reach out and talk to some people. Find time to reach out to a few people that you haven't talked to in a while, and it'll go a long way, because I think just chatting with some people can get them a little bit out of a rut right now. And it's nice to see people around, always wanting to chat as you're walking around, keeping within our distance and everything else. But it's nice to also do those phone calls and reaching out. I've gained a lot of benefits from doing some of those. So just want to share that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move down to correspondence. We have in front of us the RCMP monthly report. Is someone able to make that motion to file it? Councillor Beck?
Yes, I'd like to make the motion that council accept the RCMP monthly report for April 1st to 15th, 2020, as being received by council on Monday, April 27th, 2020, and is to be filed as presented.
A seconder? Councillor Shram? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, city counts for approval. Motion, please. Councillor Shram?
Your worship, I would move to approve the city accounts as presented by checks numbered 22788 to 22858 for the amount of $560,204.05, and the payroll vouchers numbered 10567 to 10631 in the amount of $82,889.22 for April 27th, 2020. I so move.
Okay, seconder for that. Councillor Tooley? Is there any questions? Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. A motion to go in camera. Councillor Beck?
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to move to an in-camera meeting to discuss the reopened Saskatchewan provincial government announcement on Thursday, April 23rd, and what that means for the city's human resources.
Okay, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Shram? All in favor? Okay, thank you.